Hi, it's Plant. Thank you for listening. Today we're going to be reading Soup, the Cat Covered in Soup by AugustStorm8. Here's the summary. Shinso finds a black cat with green eyes in an alleyway covered in soup and surrounded by cans of dinted soup. Like any responsible teenager, he adopts it. It didn't have a collar, so it's a free cat, right? Ow, 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 ow. Fuck, that hurt, Izuku curses. Someone had called for help in this alleyway, and when he went to check, someone rammed into him, and he fell to the ground. That's when a searing pain ripped through him, like it was taking all his bones and organs and rearranging them. And it wasn't helped by his bag full of cans of soup he'd gotten moments before, which toppled over, hit him. He tried pulling himself to his feet when he noticed he felt different. His body was still pulsing with pain, his eyes blurry, and his ears ringing. But something was very wrong. He wiggled on the ground, and that's when he realized. Damn it! He was covered in soup. He was also a cat. His afternoon started by seeing an empty fridge and being hungry. So, he went to his nearest grocer and bought some cheap soup. He felt like soup tonight, and it's cheap. So, he got at least 5. He just scooped a handful into his arms and checked out. As he was heading home, at around 6 p.m., he heard the cry, and you get the rest. The person must have been panicking and accidentally used their quirk, but he didn't notice anyone else who could pose a threat. It didn't matter anyway. It's not like he could do anything as a soggy cat who hadn't gotten used to his senses yet. By the time he could see and hear, he wobbled to his feet and wondered what to do. He could go home, but how would he get inside? Plus, it seemed his clothes and whatever in his pockets changed with him, so he had no money, no identification, and no phone. Great. He heaved a sigh, which came out as more of a saddened meow. His vocal cords felt uncomfortable by the use, and he stuttered out another strange meow, the sound unfamiliar on his tongue. He was never going to get used to this. Oh, a cat. A voice sounded from the entrance of the alleyway, curious. Izuku jolted up and felt his hair spike, his body arching on its own. Had he also gotten cat instincts along with the body? Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. They sounded calming, and their voice kind. Izuku could tell they were genuine, so he relaxed and took some shaky steps forward, only to slip on a can of soup he hadn't seen until his body fell next to it. Ouch. The person muttered to themselves and walked closer. Izuku honestly wanted to cry. His flesh still hurt from the change, and he was a cat, and his soup was wasted, and he had no money or phone or anything, and he was covered in soup in a cold, dark alley, all alone, and he wanted to curl up and forget this ever happened and wake up back in his warm bed as a human and not covered in soup. Hey, cat, can you hear me? Are you okay? What's wrong? The person, who now seemed like a blessing in disguise, soothed his shivering self. He felt hesitant hand touch him softly, and when he didn't flinch away too badly, he gingerly picked him up. You are covered in soup. No wonder you're so upset, you poor thing, the person murmured half to themselves and half to Izuku. Izuku caught a glimpse of wild purple hair and matching purple eyes before staring at the ground in despair. He was upset because he was covered in soup, but he was beginning to accept that he really was a cat, and he had no idea what to do about it. "Come on, let's get you home. I don't want to see a collar, and I've been wanting a cat." They half joked as they carried him at arm's length so they wouldn't get soup on them to home. Izuku was sure his real home was in the opposite direction, though. Apparently, the quirk used on him took more out of him than he thought, as he passed out a few minutes into being carried to the purple guy's house. He woke up when he was being juggled into one hand, while the other unlocked the door into the person's house. And once the door was shut, he took him to the bathroom immediately. "Let's get all this soup off of you, okay?" the guy said as he plugged the sink and turned a tap on, testing the temperature every few seconds, and Izuku noted that they looked the same age. "Please, do not heat water, or this is going to be unnecessarily difficult," the guy begged as he lowered Izuku into the sink. Lucky for him, Izuku did not hate baths. That is, until the water sunk into his fur, he felt mildly uncomfortable, and began trying to scramble out of the sink. The guy pushed him back in, and he meowed as loudly as he could. They meowed back. Izuku may be a cat, but he knew nothing about the cat language. He was certain this person managed to make 4 grammatical and spelling mistakes in one meow. Quite the feat, if Izuku did say so, and he meowed again. They kept meowing back and forth for a while, and Izuku is never going to meow as a human again, because how the fuck do people manage to say things so incorrectly? The bath was over before Izuku knew it, and that's when it happened. This lilac-haired criminal rolled him up into a burrito. "I've always wanted to do that," he whispered in pure glee as he held Izuku in his burrito. Izuku didn't know what was worse, being seen as a cat or being rolled into a burrito and enjoying it. It's not his fault it was so warm and comfy. At least he had somewhere to feel warm and comfy, even if he'd rather be warm and comfy in his own home. It was still better than laying in soup, freezing in an alleyway. He couldn't help the hesitant purr that escaped him as the two settled in for the night. The person had nowhere else to put Izuku, so they both slept on the bed. Once Izuku was free of his burrito, he decided he may as well be a cat, and he padded up and plopped himself on top of the person, who groaned warm-heartedly and reached a hand up to pet him, which he found he didn't hate at all. It was just weird for a stranger to be petting him, even if he was a cat. Izuku knew how heavy cats felt when they were on your chest, and he, in some way, wanted to make this guy pay for catnapping him. Izuku told himself he would think about his next move in the morning. His inexperienced purring echoed in the room as sleep consumed him. When he woke up, he felt much different from last night, like his body finally adjusted. Plus, he didn't reek of soup and feel damp anymore. He wasn't sure what time it was, but the sky was a soft yellow and a light blue. Birds were chirping nearby, and the world seemed peaceful. Not many people were awake this early. Though the world was more gay-scale than the human eye, he could still imagine it in a human's eye. His ears twitched, and he felt he could hear each individual bird's call, leaves swaying against each other, and the purple-haired person calm breathing underneath him. Wait, beneath him? Right, he remembers now. He had fallen asleep on his chest, which was warm as hell, and he did not want to move. But he needed to finally figure out how to change back to a human and go home. He was gonna miss school. Shit, he couldn't go to class as a cat anyway, but he hadn't missed a day of school, even when he had a fever that rendered him unable to move. His mom would be worried sick. He sat up and dragged himself from the warmth and held out a paw in front of him. He willed himself to turn human, but nothing happened. The world kept spinning. Izuku was still a cat. He stifled a groan of despair. What was he gonna do? He paced the bed, then leapt to the floor and kept pacing. He needed to find whoever's quirk this is and get them to reverse it, or find someone who can turn him back. Or he could be a cat until it wears off, if it wears off, that is. He tried remembering the person from last night, but it was dark, and the pain of turning into a cat made everything fuzzy. Dark hair, blue eyes, maybe? A little taller than him. They had gold nose and lip piercings and dark clothes with a white undershirt. That's all he could remember, though. Hopefully, if he could go scour the streets, he could find them. But they could be anywhere in the city or out of it by now. He groaned a meow into his paw as he fell limp onto the floor. He needed someone human to help him, but no one helped quirkless people. Wait, he's not a quirkless person anymore. He's a cat. So people will help him, at least until they find out. He could work with that. Hey, what's the matter? Are you hungry? I don't have any cat food yet. I'm sure human food won't kill you if it's one time. Plus, you've probably been eating rotten food anyways. The purple-haired guy must have waken up. He hauled himself to his feet, and despite getting a night's sleep, he had massive eye bags that were painfully noticeable. Izuku meowed. He needed a way to inform this guy he wasn't a cat. He refused to eat cat food. Plus, it would be very awkward if he did and then turned human again. He had enough embarrassment as a cat to last a lifetime. Sleeping on his chest probably wasn't the best idea now he thinks back on it. Come on. I think I have something in the fridge for us. Shit, I have school. What am I gonna do with you? He fretted out loud, and Izuku was sure he'd be fine on his own. Bored, but fine. He opened his door, and the two walked to the kitchen. In the natural light, Izuku could see his apartment, and it was small and plain. There wasn't necessarily a mess, but it wasn't organized either. Cups lined the countertops, and there was some unwashed dishes. But all trash was in or around the bin on the other side of the room, next to a couch facing away from the kitchen. As he began cooking, Izuku tested his feline legs and leapt onto the countertop to watch the boy cook some eggs and bacon, rather unskillfully. He grabbed his phone that was on charge by Izuku's spot on the counter and opened messages and tapped on Help Trainer and began tapping a text out. Izuku meowed loudly as the eggs and bacon began burning. He looked up and noticed them, quickly placing his phone down and attending to the food. Izuku looked at the screen and read the messages. Help Trainer. You, yesterday, 5:32 p.m. Load image of a cat meme. Read 5:32 p.m. Hell trainer, yesterday, 5:33 p.m. Lol. Read, 5:33 p.m. Hell trainer, yesterday, 9:27 p.m. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. Don't be late, Shinso. Read, 10:12 p.m. You. K. See you. Read, 10:12 p.m. Hey, can you look after this cat I found in an alley while I'm at school, please? Send. If only he could use these paws to type. He stood up and attempted touching letters and making a sentence. Hey, no, that's not a toy, sorry. Shinso, it was nice to have a name for his face, snatched his phone away, fixed up the message, and sent it, before putting it on the other side of the counter, out of Izuku's reach. Breakfast was almost ready, and the smell that filled the apartment was divine. Izuku's mouth watered at the prospect of food. Then Shinso's phone dinged, and he looked over at the message. All right, Kat, you're going to visit someone for the day while I'm at school. I'll pick you up a bit after 3, Shinso explained as if to a person, which was true, but he didn't know that. Izuku meowed and nodded, and Shinso looked momentarily startled before getting the bacon and eggs off the pan and onto 2 plates. They ate, and Izuku felt like he hadn't eaten anything good in years. He wolfed it all down and attempted to steal some of Shinso's, who let him take one before batting him away. There was a knock on the door, and Shinso got up and let the visitor in. Izuku following him to meet them. He assumed they were here for him. When he saw him, he almost thought they were going to get robbed in their own house by a homeless person. Then he saw the capture scarf and recognized Eraserhead, the underground hero that can erase quirks. This was perfect. All he needed to do was to get him to use his quirk, and he was free. The two greeted each other, and then they looked at Izuku, who had begun meowing urgently at them. Yeah, but nothing you're not used to, Shinso joked. What's his name? He asked, and crouched down to pat him, which was nice. Then he scratched behind the ears, and then felt wonderful. Oh, I've been calling him Cat, but I guess that isn't the best name. Soup? He replied and smiled awkwardly. Izuku did not want to be called Soup. You want to name him Soup? Eraser asked in exasperation. You can't talk after you named your cat Bastard, Shinso quipped. He named his cat Bastard. Oh, that poor cat. At least I had a reason for his name, Eraser retorted, and shifted his hand to scratch Izuku's chin. And that melted him into a purring mess. I have a reason too. When I found him, he was covered in soup and surrounded by soup cans. Shinso explained with a snicker. Izuku didn't think it was very funny, but because of the chin scratches, he let him get away with it. Oh, that makes more sense. Why was he covered in soup? Eraser sounded genuinely confused. They obviously hadn't thought of the fact that Izuku was a human turned into a cat. Dunno. Anyway, I have school, so I'll leave you to deal with soup for the day, Shinso responded and left to get ready for school. Eraser stopped petting Izuku and stood up. Okay, you better not cause any trouble for me, Soup, because I know a wonderful shelter that would take you. Eraser threatened. But Izuku wasn't listening. Instead, he was mourning the loss of Scritches and planning a way to get Eraser to use his quirk on him. Anger would be one way, but he just said he'd get rid of him if he wasn't careful. He needed to find another way. Being a cat was so exhausting. No wonder they slept 16 hours a day. Izuku thought, and began searching the apartment for either a good snoozing spot or a way to get Eraser's attention. Or he was going to, until Eraser scooped him up and called his farewell to Shinso. He dug his claws into a scarf and pulled himself to Eraser's face and meowed as loudly as he could, looking directly into his eyes. Eraser's face was worse than Shinso's. The eye bags were designer, and he looked exhausted and very much done with life, and his face didn't change a bit at his meow. Izuku meowed again. He needed him to see and to use his quirk on him. Eraser only began walking out of the apartment into his car. Izuku meowed again, and when he was put in the passenger seat of the car, he leapt to the driver's seat, and when Eraser came around and opened the door, he meowed again. Soup, move, Eraser deadpanned. Izuku only meowed again, and Eraser heaved a weary sigh. It's too early for this, he muttered, and picked Izuku up, sat in the driver's seat, and dropped Izuku back into the passenger side. Was Eraser stupid, or just way too tired to use his brain? What was so hard to understand? Something was wrong with this cat, and something needed to be done. Izuku internally sobbed, and he wondered what he would do next. Hopefully, at his house, there would be something to help him show Eraser who he was. Once they arrived, Eraser let them in and plopped onto the couch to pass out, while Izuku explored and tried to find something to write with. There was an odd scent in the house, familiar, but not. He found an empty piece of paper in his study and used his teeth to drag a pencil from a pen holder, and now he needed to figure out how to write. For a good 10 minutes, he struggled and attempted spelling out help, or Izuku Midoriya, but it was harder than it looked. He tried switching to a pen, but the same outcomes followed. He sat and huffed his unhappiness at the piece of paper, now covered in scribbles. Stupid cat paws. If only cats had thumbs, things would be much easier for him then. The unique scent that swamped the house got stronger, and Izuku stood up. Looking towards the door of the room, he saw a black and brown tabby at the entrance, eyeing him cautiously. They stared before Izuku broke eye contact, and he assumed that meant the other feline won, because he padded forward and meowed, like a cat does. But Izuku understood it. Kind of. It was a form of, "Who are you?" Izuku didn't know what else to do, so he meowed back, hoping it was something like, "I'm not a cat." He wasn't a pro cat speaker, but he did have the vocal cords of a cat now. "Not a cat. You look and smell like one," two mews replied, and they sat down in front of him. Honestly, it was unbelievable that Izuku was talking to a cat right now, like having a full conversation with a cat. "Yes, quirk used on me." Izuku wasn't sure if this cat knew what a quirk was, or if he was even meowing the right word, but he seemed to understand well enough, and twitched his ears. No? Izuku didn't know what that meant, but he meowed a no because no one knew, so whoever he was meowing about didn't know. He didn't say anything after that, only flicked his tail in farewell and left. For the rest of his time in Eraser's home, he tried writing some form of words, and annoying Eraser with the other cat, whose name he learned was Bastard, and refusing to eat cat food. And then it was 3:30 p.m., and Shinso came knocking on the door. "Was he much trouble?" Shinso began after their greetings when Eraser let him in. "He was a pleasure." He sounded sarcastic, but maybe that was normal for him. Izuku meowed his disagreement. In his opinion, this had been very unsuccessful and unpleasurable. He was still a cat after all, and none were the wiser. "Great, you can't keep him, you know," Shinso warned, and picked Izuku up protectively. "Well, my doors are always open. Him and Bastard get along well." Eraser scratched his neck guiltily, but had a small smile on his face. After that, they waved each other off, and Shinso took Izuku home, where he stole his dinner before sitting by a window to think, read, brood. His ears twitched as he heard Shinso come and stand next to him by the window. "Do you miss the streets?" "I don't know why you would, but I guess being free is nice, no matter how ugly." He mused and glanced at Izuku before reaching a hand over to stroke him. "Do you have a family out there? Maybe I accidentally took you from your mate with kittens or something. I'm sorry, but you know I couldn't leave you." He vented, and Izuku understands. He would have done the same. But Izuku isn't a cat, so it wasn't a mate with kittens he was worried about leaving alone. He did agree it was better he'd been helped by someone, even if they were too stupid to notice he was human. "Do you mind if I rant for a second? I can't afford real therapy," Shinso asked, as if Izuku could respond with a real laugh. It was nice that even though he was a cat, in some way he was still being treated like a human being. Now that he thinks about it, this is probably the longest anyone has stuck around Izuku since being diagnosed quirkless, and the longest anyone has treated him like an average person, kind of, except for his mother. It was sad how he's only talked to and treated well once he's turned into a cat, who have just as much quirk as Izuku, yet one of them is despised and abused, while the other is loved and treasured. I have a villainous quirk. My parents don't like me, and they're wealthy, so they let me live here, alone, with an allowance every month, but it's lonely, and I only really have Aizawa-sensei, since no one at school wants to be friends with the future villain. Izuku forgot for a moment Shinso was venting in his own thoughts. Whoops. I like cats because they're quiet, and they don't judge, and calming. No human being is like that. Aizawa-sensei comes close, but he's not calming, especially when he trains me. Then he becomes terrifying. Shinso shuddered, and his eyes were looking into the distance like he was getting war flashbacks or something. Noted, do not get trained by Eraser. Not that he ever would. Izuku would have been flattered by being called calming and not judgmental, but Shinso was talking about cats, not him. He wasn't a cat, so it didn't count. I've been looking for a cat for a while, since I settled into this place, I think, but none really stuck out. I knew I wanted a rescue, but they were all too expensive to care for, or too temperamental. Then I met you, the oddly understanding cat who I found covered in soup, and it was like I was always meant to find you, Shinso confessed with a soft smile, and Izuku's heart melted. He liked this guy. He was nice. Even if, when he becomes human again, Shinso will change his mind. Right now, he was a cat. Worrying was a human Izuku problem. Anyway, you should know, I'm training with Aizawa-sensei to be a hero, and in 9 months, I'm not going to be around as much with hero course stuff. From what Aizawa-sensei has told me, I hope you'll be okay on your own. Shinso sighed sadly, and Izuku shared that sentiment. If he was still a cat by then, he'd probably be a cat forever. His mother would be worried sick. He just have to hope that soon either the quirk would wear off or Eraser would use his quirk on him. His hope was growing slim, though. At least, as a cat, he wasn't bullied. He was well taken care of, and the only bad thing was, at some point, cat food and the vet would become bigger issues. Hopefully, he can evade capture when Shinso has the time to take him to a vet. He thinks he understands why so many animals hate vets now. Izuku was chilling in Eraser's apartment on the couch while him and Shinso chatted and designed possible hero outfits for Shinso while the news played in the background. It had been a solid month. Izuku wasn't sure exactly how long since he'd turned into a cat, but he had a feeling the quirk wasn't wearing off anytime soon, or at all. He sighed quietly and flicked his tail. He was quickly picking up usual cat habits from his cat body and Bastard, who was also on the couch beside him. It was nice being able to properly converse with someone, even if that someone was a cat. Izuku missed being able to ramble to himself, though. The closest he got to rambling was small chittering sounds like cats make when they see birds. Eraser and Shinso were only amused by his unique meows and chirping. It was annoying how dense they were. If he was being honest, Izuku was all about open-mindedness, but if Izuku was in their shoes, he's certain he would have figured it out by now. Another few days had passed, and while the three of them and Bastard were in the living room, news on while everyone chilled, Shinso and Eraser had just finished from some training and were wasting the afternoon with a coffee in hand. The news reporter speaks a name Izuku hadn't heard in so too long. Izuku Midoriya is still missing and has been for over a month now. Because he is quirkless, it is assumed he has died. They went on, but all Izuku could focus on was the fact that people thought he was dead. Izuku stands up and meows, looking at the TV. And Eraser seemed to have heard the pitiful sentence about the quirkless kid gone missing. Poor kid. Do you know him, Soup? Do you know where he is? Eraser asked, and took a sip of coffee. He points his paws at the TV, where his face previously was, then to himself. He swears that Eraser's quirk was making him go blind or something. Was he your owner? Maybe he went looking for you and got lost. You both disappeared around the same time, Eraser suggested, and scratched his chin thoughtfully. Maybe they were doing this on purpose, because quirkless kids shouldn't exist, so let's just turn them into cats. At least as a cat, he can get away with being useless. He meowed in frustration, his tail lashing in irritation, as he sat back down and rested his head on his paws. He wasn't letting them pet him for the rest of the night now. Eraser, Soup won't let me pet him. Did you piss him off or something? Shinso calls out from the guest room where Shinso stayed sometimes when his apartment got too lonely, and when Eraser got lonely and Mike couldn't come around. No, He's been in a bad mood since seeing the missing kid. Maybe he misses him or something, Eraser reasoned as he entered the room and observed Izuku's behavior, which currently was him dodging Shinso's attempts to pet him. He said they weren't getting any pets and he was gonna follow through with that. He meant to meow at them angrily, but instead he accidentally hissed. He had no idea he could do that, but then again, he'd never been a cat before, and cats usually hissed when they were mad or upset. Well, yeah, he's angry. That's the first time he's hissed. Maybe he wants us to go find that Midoriya kid. Shinso wondered aloud and took a few steps away from a bristling Izuku Midoriya, the Midoriya kid in question. Yeah, we can look. I'll get access to whatever the police department has, and we can look for more clues, Eraser promised, and it seemed he genuinely wanted to find Izuku, but that was crazy because no one wanted Izuku around, except as a cat. It's that, or something is wrong health-wise, Shinso added, probably because they had no clue if Izuku had any diseases or hidden injuries, because he hadn't been to a vet yet and never planned to. He hissed in a warning. Don't you dare suggest it. Maybe we should take him to the vet, Shinso finished, and Izuku hissed and growled again. He would rather die. They would have to take his cold, dead corpse to the vet if they wanted to take him there so bad. He would use a litter box, but there were lines he refused to cross. Yeah, we should, but the last time we tried to take him, I had to patch several holes in the walls, Eraser pointed out grumpily, and Izuku felt terrible for wasting his time and money, but no way was he going to the vet. One last attempt. We could call someone else in to help. Izuku knew Shinso was just worried, but come on, he's fine. No vet needed, just a quirk that erases other quirks. Alright, I'll prepare the carrier. You try and lock him in a room so he's easier to corner, Eraser instructed, and went to the cupboard they stored things in to keep them out of sight. It was an absolute abomination, and if Izuku ever became human again, he'd offer to clean and organize it. But right now, Izuku had bigger problems. He immediately darted from the guest room and tried to find the best hiding spot with as many escape routes as possible. He squeezed under the couch. Thanks to not eating much because he refused cat food, he was skinny enough to slide under with ease. He's under the couch, Shinso informed, and Eraser grunted in acknowledgement. Fuck. Izuku wasn't usually one to curse, but right now seemed like a good time. If he got caught, vets would be poking and prodding him and shoving needles into him and giving him things for cats, not humans. He did not need that at all. A hand reaching under the couch caught him off guard, and he dipped out and under the armchair, earning a groan of annoyance from Shinso and Eraser. This dodging capture continued for a good 15 minutes before zipping from hiding place to hiding place. A large calloused hand practically slapped him to the ground. Gotcha, Eraser whispered in triumph, an evil smirk on his face. He struggled and hissed and yowled in defiance. But, alas, an underground pro-hero was stronger than a half-starved cat. A second hand wrapped around his torso and lifted him into the air, where he continued thrashing around, trying to escape. Soup, I swear to Nezu if you don't stop. Eraser's hair levitated, and his eyes flashed red with irritation. In that moment, Izuku and Eraser made eye contact. In place of the small black cat in Eraser's hold, a teenager fell to the floor in a heap, gasping as he regained his composure. "Oh," Izuku, Shinso, and Eraser said in unison. "You guys are fucking morons," Izuku spoke up after a stunned silence. "What?" Shinso stated, and stared like a deer in headlights at Izuku. "How is it not obvious that I was human?" Izuku cried and stood up, shakily finding his balance. After over a month of being a cat, his human body felt weird now. Shit, maybe I am a moron. Shinso brushed a hand through his scalp and reevaluated his life decisions. "Kid, explain." Eraser finally spoke. He looked like his life flashed before his eyes, to be honest. Izuku had heard Eraser had a reputation of being stern and intimidating. Yes, it was shocking that somebody found out about a soft side without him letting them. "Someone used their quirk on me, and I turned into a cat. Shinso found me, and I've been trying to tell you since then. It was really lucky, though, because Shinso knows you, so I got in contact with someone with an erasing quirk, which made things a lot simpler, but you both were so dense you didn't pick up any of my signals." Izuku explained fully, an annoyed expression adorning his face. The hollow cheekbones and tired eyes made it hard to see any real rage. Being a cat for a month seemed to have still affected Izuku's human body. He found he had all his possessions, but his phone was flat. It had been 68%. And his hair was slightly longer and greasy. Now that I think about it, how hadn't I guessed? It was so obvious. Eraser muttered to himself, and seemed genuinely offended that he didn't catch this. "And named a human being Soup," Shinso despaired, and dragged a hand down his face, which looked a few years older. "Oh yeah, about that. Why did you name Bastard? He's actually a good guy," Izuku questioned, his demeanor changing easily to one of curiosity. "What do you mean, he's a good guy? He's been a little shit, and I quite remember clearly that you were a little shit with him," Eraser retorted with a sharp glare. "I was bored. Being a cat is so boring. Anyways, enough of that. I have to go home and tell my mother I'm still alive." Izuku was mentally preparing himself for the possibility he'd drown in her tears. He slipped around Eraser, still wobbling from not being used to two legs again. Damn, being cat really did a number on him. He was feeling the effects of when he first turned, only feeling less intense because he was more human than cat. "Wait, I can't let you leave. You were attacked by someone. Plus, you're publicly missing, and I can tell you're in no shape to travel right now. Please go sit down while I start making some calls," Eraser stated in his teacher voice, and Izuku knew his mother would have to wait. Slowly, he slid onto the couch and realized how tired his body was, and he curled into a ball like he would do as a cat. He read it took an average of 66 days to gain a new habit, but clearly there were exceptions. Shinso, who was previously standing, decided to make himself another cup of coffee because he wasn't caffeinated enough to process the past 10 minutes. Izuku silently wishes he could disappear and never return, because the more he dwelled on it, the more uncomfortable this whole situation felt. Complete strangers had practically kidnapped him and forced him to be their pet. Sure, he looked like a cat, but still. His eyelids drooped close, and he decided that was a problem for future Izuku to be embarrassed about. For now, he would rest and recover from the last month and 12 days. And if he felt 2 pairs of eyes on him for a moment, no, he didn't. Hopefully those 2 could fix everything while he was out. Well, he just had to see what happened after his nap, of course.